Thank you for joining us on this session of Green Team Academy's Future of Climate Action series, where we're interviewing different environmental leaders in order to learn more about what the future of climate action looks like and how Green Team Academy can show up to best support that future. So before I pass it over to Joan and our amazing guests, Karen and Mike from Sustainable Resilient Longmont, I would like to share some events that Green Team Academy has coming up. So today is going to be our last day of the Giving Tuesday fundraiser that we're running. And part of this fundraiser, for every $25 donation made, we're gifting 2 free tickets to our virtual holiday concert that will be taking place on December 19th with the Magnie Fam Jamily. This is an awesome little family band that you won't want to miss. Please feel free to support our fundraiser and share it with others who might be able to support, and mark December 19th for that little family concert. Then on December 28th, we have a Reflect and Renew event where we'll be reflecting on 2023, setting intentions for 2024, and renewing ourselves with a nice Reiki energy healing session. So then finally on January 6th, we have an awesome vision boarding workshop that we will be co-hosting. So all of these events can be found on Green Team Academy's event page, which we will drop the link in the chat for. If you're all ready for the main event, I'll hand it over to Joan to introduce our guests.
Thanks for kicking us off there, Jen. And before we started recording, we got to be chatting with some of the guests who are on with us, or some of the folks that are tuning in today. And it's so cool that we get to meet firsthand people in Uganda and Malawi and around the world. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. In today's session, this is near and dear to my heart because we have Mike Baum and Karen Dike, and they are co-chairs of the Renewable Energy Committee with Sustainable Resilient Longmont. And back in 2013, I was living in Longmont right after this massive flood. I wanted to be part of the local sustainability group, and there wasn't one. And people at that time were saying, nobody in Longmont cares about sustainability. And I was like, you know what? That can't be true. And I started this same group as Sustainable Revolution Longmont. We did the first Youth of the Earth Festival in 2015. We had over 1,000 people at Boulder County Fairgrounds. And within the first 2 years, the city council, who had earlier said nobody cares about sustainability, with pressure and engagement from our group, they passed a sustainability plan. They hired a sustainability coordinator and a sustainability consultant. And I think with help from Karen and some others, they signed the Ready for 100 Renewable Energy Pledge before the city of Denver and others that seemed to be more progressive. So I'm super excited to hear what is going on in Longmont, and especially about this. With my background as a building energy engineer, I'm always super interested in how we can make our homes more efficient.
Great to be here. Looking forward to speaking with Joan and you folks about what we're doing here with electrification.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen, and also pleased to be here and reconnect with Joan a little bit.
Yeah, that's terrific. And I think you're also a board member of Sustainable Resilient Longmont. So thanks for your leadership for continuing that all on. How about, Mike, do you want to start with kind of an overview of what is Sustainable Resilient Longmont, SRL, and give us kind of some context? You could also mention where Longmont, Colorado is, since we have folks from around the world joining us.
Sure. We're just outside of Denver, Colorado, which is considered the western part of the United States, but we are landlocked and have a lot of mountains here. Okay. So this will just give you a brief overview of what we do. We were founded in 2015. Well, I thought that's when we were founded. According to Joan, it was probably a couple years earlier.
Yeah, it was.
It was essentially, as Joan mentioned, to have an Earth Day that would inspire hope and change. So we're essentially an environmental education, advocacy, and action group. Our pillars of sustainability are environmental protection, responsible economic growth, and social equity. So basically, we have 3 teams, 3 major areas that we focus on. One is zero waste, one is renewable energy, and one is Earth Day. And we've maintained one clear message throughout the years, and that's for the future of humanity and our amazing planet to work together on solving global challenges at a local level. I'll go quick through the zero waste action team. is actually headed up by our chair and another board member. So they basically go out and spend a lot of time in the community doing cleanups and go to quite a few of the events to help recycle as much as we can at these events, as opposed to just throwing it in the trash. And that's what these first three are about. I'm going to jump here to Renewable Energy Action Team. Now, this is the one that both Karen and I co-chair and have been involved with. And this is the group that we're going to talk more about today. As Joan mentioned, a 100% renewable energy resolution was agreed on with the city in early 2018, which was before my time, but I know Karen and Joan were very excited when that happened. And we also started hosting electric vehicle fairs back in 2018, because that's also a big part of our organization as far as what we do. And then most recently, we launched an Electrify Longmont campaign in 2022, which we'll talk more about. As far as the electric vehicle fair, we typically have a good 600 to 700 attendees. And I think the most fun part of it is we get many EV enthusiasts who have EVs to come out and show off their EVs. Some of them give folks a ride, talk to anybody who's interested in talking to them, because anybody who owns an EV loves to talk about it. And so we spend a good part of the day focused on electric vehicles. We have panels with folks who talk about their experiences, and we typically have vendors out that have something to do with either selling an electric vehicle. Sometimes it's electric bike vehicle folks. We have other vendors that sell things like solar panels for homes. The other area that we've most recently gotten into, and we launched it last August, was what we call home electrification. The first meeting we had was at a brewery in Longmont, and we had a good 50 folks show up, and we had three presenters that talked about what's happening in electrifying homes. We had the City of Longmont Energy Strategy Director. We had a guy who owns an HVAC contracting business talk about what it takes to put in appliances that would electrify your home, such as if your gas furnace goes out, you could replace it with a heat pump, which runs off electricity as opposed to natural gas. And then we also had an expert from, which is the National Renewable Energy Lab that we're lucky enough to have here in Denver. And then this year, in March, we also had a small seminar where we had three folks come and talk about what's happening with electrification. One of them was on electric vehicle ownership, and the director of energy and electrification here, Longmont, Susan Bartlett. And then Elephant Energy Systems is a company that does a full home electrification. Just a couple months ago, it was the end of September, we had a big electrification fair where we had guest speakers, including our mayor. We were very excited to have Joan Peck speak. And we even had Representative Joe Neguse from the U.S. House of Representatives. We had folks that were focused on electric vehicles here, as well as electrifying your home, all the way from people that install things like electric vehicle chargers, all the way up to companies that will come into your home and help you figure out what steps you want to take to make your home fully electrified. And we had many nonprofits show up too that are getting involved with this, and it'd be very helpful if you're interested in even getting a loan, let's say, to install some appliance that's tied to electrification. And then our third arm is the Earth Day Action Team, which Karen was very involved with this year. And again, that was what kicked off this organization. So that's basically who we are and what we do. At the end of the year, we always have a sustainability award dinner, and we try and honor folks in the community for what they've done as far as sustainability. So we have a Youth Environment Stewardship Award. We have Volunteer of the Year Award, and probably 4 or 5 others that we give out awards for, and just celebrate the fact that we've got such a wonderful community that is so involved with sustainability. And then looking ahead, We plan to expand all these programs.
Perfect. It's amazing. Did you hear what all they're doing? That's crazy, right? All this stuff. And the fact that I had this idea as an individual person, like there must be people in Longmont that care. And when I couldn't get people interested, I just started it anyway. And then I left after, and it just kept going. So you don't have to do it all yourself, but if you're the one that has the idea, then you're the one to start it. And then amazing people like Mike and Karen come in and take it to the next levels. So that's pretty awesome. Karen, I was wondering if you could give an overview of why, just from a carbon emission standpoint and as a climate action, SRL is already working on solid waste and getting people involved with everything else. But why is the electrifying homes such a big deal, and why did you guys decide to focus on that? So just from that bigger picture.
Yeah, I think for me, SRL is taking what we know needs to be done globally, and we're applying it at the local level and seeing what difference we can make when we are at that truly local level. And if you look at where we have our carbon footprint, I think it's 20 to 30% of our carbon that is in our homes, with home heating, home air conditioning, water heating, the way we cook our food. And so if we can give people ways that they can stop that use of carbon in their homes. We've also made their homes safer and cleaner without burning gas in our homes. And so it is possible to do all of that on the electric grid. And then the other thing we work on that really hasn't been mentioned much is we have our electric generation. We also work on how can we influence them to be cleaner as they make our electricity. So if we can make our energy on our grid clean, which is really hard to get to that last 5 to 10%, but if we can make that clean and then we stop using fossil fuels in our homes, then we can have a big impact.
Yeah, that's a good overview. And the other thing I'm wondering if either you or Mike want to address is just from the climate justice perspective. And we got a little bit of input on that before we started our recording, talking with some of the folks that are joining us right now in Africa who are not using fuels for heating or cooling their homes, which is pretty different than the average home in the US.
Yeah, I think if we look at this globally, the US uses and also produces a big share of the fossil fuel carbon comes from us. And so how do we stop that? On a more local level, when we did our resolution, we got the city council to sign a resolution to be 100% renewable energy for our electric grid by 2030. And PRPA, who does our electricity generation, has said that they'll meet that by 2030. Part of that resolution was that we would always consider how diverse that is and how we can bring others along. What we always said is we can't move forward if other people are left behind. So we always try to pay attention to that. But we know that we need to look at how climate is really affecting different communities in different ways. I can afford to heat and cool my house. I do have heat pumps, but I can afford that, and some people can't. And so as we did our last energy fair, we had people from a state office that helps people with loans to help them purchase this type of equipment so that we can make sure that everybody can get into looking at heating and cooling without being financially strapped. And so that's been a big part of what we try to always look at.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think just globally, just from the moral issue, that even though the US is not the biggest producer of carbon emissions this year, but historically we have been. So if you look at from overall time, and yet the risks of climate, which are hitting here at home, which that 2013 flood is what prompted the forming of this group, but that people in the global south and island countries are the ones that are at the highest risk for extreme weather events and for for facing these impacts. So I think from a moral standpoint too, it just makes sense to do it. I was wondering, Mike, could you walk us through, if like for a typical home in Longmont, what does it actually mean to electrify your home? Because just as Karen was saying, the idea is electrify everything and clean the grid. That gets us to a fossil fuel free future. But could you explain, just like on an average house, where are the gas using appliances and what are the different options?
Sure. And that's a really good question. It's something that we really emphasized when we did our most recent Electrify Longmont fair this past fall. And our goal was that anybody that walks out should have some kind of a plan to move forward with what we call electrifying their home. And you're right, there's many parts to it. And our goal, again, was to try and have people prepared so that if their furnace goes out, which is probably the number one carbon generating appliance, and it's because at least most furnaces use gas here in Colorado. Very few folks have switched over yet, but that's what we're pushing for, is to switch your furnace, which uses gas and generates all that carbon, over to a heat pump, which uses electricity. And we're pushing for the electricity to be 100% renewable fairly soon by 2030. So that's probably the number one source of carbon in your home, is your furnace. Then you've got your water heater. Most water heaters also connect to gas, and that's another device that you can replace with a heat pump based system that runs off electricity. And then on top of that, you have gas stoves, and quite a few people have gas stoves. You can get rid of those and run electric. Now they make convection stoves that they say work just as well as a gas. I know I've got quite a few friends who have them, and I'm looking at switching out too. Then, of course, you have your vehicles, and we're pushing for folks to get electric vehicles and switch over to having a charging setup at their home. And even if you can't afford to put a charging system in your home, or you live in an apartment or you're renting, the city is now working on more and more charging stations out in public, or there's a lot of private companies too that are installing them. So those are the really big areas that you can focus on as far as electrifying your home.
Okay, perfect. That's a good overview. And Karen, you had mentioned earlier that in addition to just going electric and reducing your carbon emissions, that it is also a healthier solution or safer. What are some of the main things? When Mike was mentioning the gas cooking, that's one of the things that came to mind.
Yeah, if you look at having natural gas coming into your home, that's always a potential source of a leak that can be dangerous, starting a fire and such. Recent studies have shown that having a gas cooking stove in your house, you have increased levels of benzene. So natural gas, first of all, it's not natural, it is methane. And it does come with other impurities with it. And one of those is benzene, which can be very harmful to your health. Methane itself, it doesn't cause as many health issues unless it's in extremely high concentrations, but benzene and some of the other impurities can be harmful to your health. Having that cooking stove in your kitchen where a lot of activity goes on is really not healthy.
Yeah, and I think some of those reports showed that is leaking even when the stove is off. And if you do have a gas cooking stove and you're going to keep that for a minute, one of the other things is to always make sure that you're running your exhaust fan and turn that exhaust fan on before you start cooking so that it gets a vortex and is able to exhaust those fumes, because there are potentially some links between that and childhood asthma in particular. So just to reduce your risks of all that.
And it's almost impossible to keep a gas from leaking. If you think of how hard it is sometimes to stop a leaky faucet, which is water, it's even harder to prevent gas from leaking.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see that them saying, yeah, they pretty much are leaking even when they're off.
Yeah.
So that's
as well as your water heater. It might not be heating water at that time, but it might be leaking. All of
Yeah.
these appliances can be leaking.
And the other thing is what I learned doing the building energy engineering is if you tighten your home, you seal the air leaks, you put a lot of insulation. When you have those gas appliances, like your water heater in particular, there's a risk of it backdrafting and causing carbon monoxide in the home. So just getting those gas appliances completely out makes it easier to have a very tight shell as well. The other thing I was wondering about is I know that the price of heat pumps and the cost of doing all this is high, and also the complexity of how do you do this. I did a couple interviews over on the Climate Action Homes YouTube channel with Elephant Energy. But when people are saying, I don't know what to do, or I don't know how I can afford it, Mike or Karen, you guys could chime in there. What are some of the resources that you point people to? Because it's one thing to want to do it, but it's another thing to be able to do it, to figure it out, and also the finances.
I think that some of the organizations like Elephant Energy are very good at being able to pinpoint how you can do this in the most economical way. And we aren't telling everybody to go out and buy a new furnace, a new water heater, and a new stove, but be prepared to change those out when they do break down. So that's been the message we give.
I would echo that. Elephant Energy is actually one of our favorites here in the Boulder area. They do a great job. They'll come in and they'll work with you as you figure out what things you want to replace. When, let's say, they do go out on you, like a furnace doesn't last forever. Usually they last for maybe 15, 20 years at best. So it's all about being prepared when they go out, because to switch over to a different system that doesn't use gas, you also have to have the electrical hooked up properly. And sometimes that can take a couple weeks to get an electrician out there and set that up. And just to know and make sure that you can install a system and it's going to work. Sometimes you do need to tighten your home up a little more with insulation. Otherwise, it's just not going to be efficient enough. So you've got all that going. And the other thing that I think is very exciting is some of the legislation, especially the IRA, and it's over $380 billion worth of money that's going to go to not only consumers like us, but also to the manufacturers that are building all things renewable, whether it's electric vehicles or batteries for the vehicles or heat pumps. And so there's a lot of money now available to help subsidize all of us to get into these new appliances. And Colorado just recently increased their rebate. And in fact, I think it might even be a point of sale now, where right now they give $2,500 back if you buy an electric vehicle, and in 2024 it's going to be $5,000. And then there's a federal rebate that's $7,500. The local and state governments and federal government is doing a lot to try and transition all of us over from gas to electric. And so I think that's pretty exciting too.
I will just add, there are some low interest loans or ways to get additional monies from the state. And we did have somebody from the state come out at our last event that we had. And cities also, some of them have help for people who are low income. And so I know that our city is looking at low income and how can they help but frequently landlords, how do they help that move forward? As we look at that, we also need to make sure that our building codes, and we're working on that some as an organization, how do we get the city to move faster for new buildings who have building codes where they are ready for EV chargers and so that they are electrification ready. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that there are already 2 cities in Colorado that have in their new codes, they're requiring all electric for their new buildings. So not just even electric ready, but completely all around. What do you think are the main obstacles that are remaining for people? So you raise the awareness, somebody says, okay, I do want to electrify my home, but what are some of the main obstacles that you are seeing that need to be addressed?
One is the contractors, the people that we hire to come into our home to install heat pumps or whatever. We don't have enough trained people. And it's easier on Christmas morning when your furnace goes out for them to say, let me just give you this gas furnace and it's cheaper. So I think training people who work for the contractors how to put in heat pumps, and also to have them see it as a benefit.
That is definitely one barrier. And I think that's a great question because there's quite a few barriers. I think one of the biggest one is just financial. It's very costly right now to transition over to a non-gas based furnace. Unfortunately, even with all of the rebates, and I just recently have been pricing some of this and working with a friend doing the same, it's still a little more expensive if you look at your upfront costs to switch over from a gas-based system to a heat pump system, even with all the rebates, which is really sad. However, I think in the future, you're going to see costs come down as volumes go up. And the other piece is almost everybody looks at what is it going to cost me today to get into this? But if you look at the total cost of ownership over the entire lifetime of the product, for instance, a heat pump, we're pretty sure that gas prices are going to go up and electric probably won't go up as fast or maybe even stay flat. It's going to cost a lot more to have a gas furnace over the next 20 years than if you put in a heat pump system. That's probably one of the biggest barriers in my mind is just the cost. And then there's others, and one of them that most people in Longmont don't even know what you're talking about when you say electrify your home. They say, I already have electricity going to my house. What are you talking about? It's what we do. We try and make people aware of what does this mean, electrifying your home? And like we mentioned earlier, it's just being ready to switch out that gas appliance when it dies on you to something that is more sustainable, and over the cost of ownership, it's probably going to be cheaper.
Yeah. And from my experience doing the solar sales, what I'm seeing needs to happen is that there needs to be some other financing options, because I've seen that too. When you're looking at getting a loan for X amount and taking on debt of, let's say, $20,000 or $30,000, that's a big decision for a lot of people.
Sure.
I think if there can be something more like an energy efficiency lease, that kind of financing would allow people to do that kind of bill swap. The city of Fort Collins, I believe, has some on-bill financing. So I think that some other financing is the other obstacle that I see to more people going forward to electrify. Karen, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think for me, the benefit of SRL has been able to work at a local level and see improvements. Joan mentioned when we hired the first sustainability person, and now I think our sustainability office has 5 people, and they're starting to actually be able to make movement. Movement is slow, not only nationally, but also locally, but I think I've seen a lot of local progress, being able to influence and just training people so that more people start demanding that we have a cleaner energy and that we move away from fossil fuel.
I can't believe there's 5 people in that department. That's so cool.
Yeah.
The other thing that I learned about city government being in Longmont, because I hadn't been involved in any of that earlier, once you realize that they're working for you, and it's your responsibility as someone living there to let them know what you care about. And if you don't, then you're abdicating your responsibility and your power to somebody else that will step in, which may be bigger corporations or money or polluters or something like that. So it is really heartening to see that a fairly small group of people can have such a big impact as SRL is doing.
Yeah, and I think one thing we didn't mention is we try to stay in close contact with the city. So we try to stay in really close contact with the city and push them forward rather than setting their path, because they do have contact with lots of developers and the codes and all sorts of things, but we can continue to advocate and push them, but to make sure we're staying in close contact. It's been something that's been successful, I think, for us.
We're very optimistic about the opportunities here in Longmont and the rest of the country as well, but certainly where we focus here in Longmont, we're seeing, I think, more and more people getting interested in this. And it seems just in the next couple of years, I feel like the costs for most of these appliances are coming down fast. Electric vehicle costs are coming down and rebates are going up. There going to be some rebates available. I think I mentioned it at point of sale now. So it's not just a tax rebate. It's actually, you just get this money back immediately when you buy the car. I really do think over the next couple of years, we're going to see some fairly big changes in adoption rates for not only the appliances that go in your home, but electric vehicles that you drive. And that's all very exciting to me. And it keeps me going and doing this.
It's absolutely amazing to hear all of the work and how you're empowering homeowners to really make changes that they're probably going to be making anyway, make them in a more advantageous way. So thank you both very much for your time and all of the work that you do. It's absolutely amazing.
Thank you both for joining us today. And just as a reminder, today is the last day of our Giving Tuesday special. So if anyone feels inclined to support the work that we're doing in climate justice, being able to amplify the voices and help empower eco leaders on the ground in all these places that have joined us today, Malawi and Ghana/Sudan and Uganda, the Philippines, Cambodia, Bangladesh, all the places that people have joined our International Climate Action Challenge. If that's something that's important to you, is supporting the folks that are most at extreme risk from the climate crisis that we're facing, then please do make an effort, make a $25 contribution, and we'll get you a couple passes to our holiday benefit concert that's coming up on December 19th with the Magnie fam Jamly. And this is my nephew and his family. And I think Elena their 13-year-old has a few CDs out already. They're just a really fantastic group. I think you'll love that. As Jen mentioned, December 28th, we're doing the Reflect and Renew session with journaling, meditation, and Reiki energy healing as a nice way to wrap up the year. And then on January 6th, our vision board workshop, which is a fundraiser with life coach Lisa McMurdy, who will be leading that for us. So thank you so much, everybody. Next week, we'll be wrapping up our Future of Climate Action series, talking about a challenge for you and just helping people see that no matter what community you're a part of, there is a place where you are seeing things that can be done, and you are the one to help your faith community, your school, your city, your any kind of community be one of these eco leaders, just like we're seeing that Longmont has turned into. So thanks so much, Karen and Mike, for joining us today. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to end the recording, but anybody that's here live, feel free to stay on